Supreme Court justices appeared deeply torn about a high-profile abortion case out of Idaho during oral arguments on Wednesday. At issue is a question of whether or not the federal government can override state policy on abortion during emergency situations. Idaho has a near total ban of abortion on the books with a carve-out for the life of the mother, but the Biden administration is arguing that violates federal law because of this law that passed in the 1980s called the Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act, or EMTALA, and they are basically arguing that the exemption needs to be a bit broader than what Idaho put on the books. Naturally, one of the big questions that came up during the hearing was to what extent there is actually any daylight between Idaho's law and what the Biden administration wants. The lawyer representing Idaho argued that there wasn't really any differences, but the Solicitor General representing the Biden administration argued that there is a difference, that Idaho's law refers to situations that could involve the death of the mother, and the exception that they want is a bit broader. It should encompass emergency situations at large, including where the health of the mother is at risk. We should note that EMTALA, again, which passed in the 1980s, mandates that emergency rooms that participate in Medicare provide necessary stabilizing treatment to patients who are in dire straits. The lawyer for Idaho noted at one point that the EMTALA policy did not say anything about superseding state law, so that was an issue point there. The three justices on the Supreme Court seemed pretty skeptical, though, of Idaho's arguments here, and they were really bombarding the lawyer with a bunch of different scenarios. Elena Kagan, for example, noted how some women in Idaho had to be helicoptered out of the state to go to another state and blamed the abortion ban for that. Amy Coney Barrett seemed pretty skeptical at one point about Idaho's arguments as well, though we should say it wasn't fully clear where she stood on this case in general, but she did have some skepticism about one of the arguments that were made. And we also had a tough time reading Chief Justice John Roberts. He was kind of a bit mercurial about where he stood on this as well, and he is generally considered the most moderate member of the conservative bloc on the Supreme Court. A decision in this case is expected by June. This is one of two high-profile abortion cases before the Supreme Court this term, the other one being the abortion pill case that the Supreme Court heard arguments on just a few weeks ago. This case that we heard Wednesday is pretty significant because it could set precedents about what extent Congress can override state policy on abortion. As of now, the general understanding is that the federal government supersedes state law on things like this. We shall see what the Supreme Court does in this matter.